So we're going to go ahead and start. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:33. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I make a motion.
Troy, second? I'll second. Erica, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is adopted. I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 1, 2021.
So moved.
Thank you, Troy. Second? I'll second. Thank you,
Keep things
Erica.
rolling.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion's adopted. Okay, the next section, we're going to turn over to Gabe Hamilton, the Director of Learning for ANWSD, and Shannon Morning, Principal of MAU Middle School and High School. They're going to discuss educational opportunities and challenges. Have you guys determined who's going first?
We're co-presenting.
Yeah.
You're great.
Would you like me to come to the table, or?
That makes sense. And I will share the slides through the Zoom. All right, Dave Hamilton,
Shannon Warden.
thanks for having us today.
And he so kindly had me go first. So I believe that you all have talked about enrollment and what our enrollment looks like over the course of the next several years. And we just wanted to bring that back up as something that we've been looking at as well. So this is the projected enrollment data for Mount Abraham in grades 7 through 12 for the next, including this year, and then 4 additional years. And you can see from the graph that it's a pretty steady decline over the next several years. There's a link here to our program of studies if you're interested in seeing what all of our offerings are made. If no changes are made in terms of a merger or looking at ways to share resources, we are looking at continued cuts of teachers through reduction in force and or attrition, which we have already been doing, not refilling positions of folks that have left or retired. This can lead to limited program offerings, loss of programs, increased class sizes, which we're already seeing in some areas, and creates a number of concerns, specifically in performing arts, elective offerings in our core content areas, the Department of Design Technology, world language. We've already phased out or in our last year of phasing out Latin and going to 2 languages. Further cuts would limit our ability to offer world language for middle school and other extension opportunities for our middle school students, previously known as exploratories.
So similarly for Virgins, looking at the same type of data for grades 7 through 12, you can see a similar trend in decline starting with this year and moving out the next 4 years. And similarly, if you would like to see more information about the programming here at Virgins, you can click on the program of studies there. But ultimately, continued cuts, as Shannon described, would result in limited course offerings. In some cases, programming might become threatened. Some particular areas of concern for us here in Virgins are performing arts and music programs. Personalized learning and electives tend to get hit harder. World languages is another concern, and then our AP offerings, which have already been kind of hard to offer due to low course requests. It's been hard to offer a robust menu of advanced placement courses. So this is kind of a repeat of the 2 schools and their enrollment data, but it adds the combined enrollment data. So you can see, obviously, with two declining trends coming together would also mean a decline, but an overall higher number across a potential of two merged schools. Which leads us to looking at some of the benefits and challenges that we might face in looking at a potential merger.
So we wanted to provide you some context of some side-by-side comparisons. So you have as much information as we're talking about programs and program cuts and electives to give you an idea of what all that means. So the first piece of information that you need to know is what our graduation requirements are and how aligned we are in some areas and not aligned in others. For example, financial literacy is its own separate requirement here that's embedded within our math requirement. We require completion of a PLP with a presentation during the senior year. Regens is not quite there, and those are some of the kind of the bigger ones. But there are a lot of similarities, and just some of the numbers are a little bit different in terms of electives. Yep.
Can you just tell me what a PLP is?
Personalized learning plan. Thank you for the question.
So, oops, it's weird. It switched on my screen, but not up there. There it goes. All right, just a little delay. So in terms of course offerings, so these are, this is basically in looking at the program of studies for the two school districts, specifically for the two high schools. You can see that by those same areas for the graduation requirements, there's differences in the number of offerings already that we see, based in some, influencing this in some ways is the size of the school. And you can see that going down, so starting with English, 11 course offerings. So this means that there's 11 different options basically that a high school student can choose from, compared to Mount Abe where there's 24, but the rotation basically means that there's a sequence where some courses are offered like an alternate year. So every other year that course is available. And so again, just providing you with some of the information about the programming. You can see already in some areas there are few course offerings compared to others. Again, the big departments or areas that have high numbers of requirements, like ELA, math, science, social studies, tend to have more offerings than some of the electives, just because of the challenges. If electives you get choice in, same with some of the smaller requirements. Some students just take the minimum requirements and others branch out and explore those areas more heavily. So that gives you a sense and a predictor, more or less, of how robust the offerings might be for any given program. In terms of the world languages, here at Virgins, for example, French has kind of had to be phased out in recent years based on kind of competed interests. We can't offer everything. We have to make some choices about what offerings are made. So now, yeah.
Are we able to ask questions during, or should we wait until after?
It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
Okay, because I just see some errors here, like social studies, I know rotates some, and I know like French, so when are these like next year? Like, I know we have French this year, just one class or two classes, like, I just want to be very specific as to where this data is coming from and which year we're drawing this data from.
This is just looking at the current program of studies and what is described in them.
Okay, because I know social studies offers a rotating schedule for their AP courses. So I just want to maybe, before this gets fully published, maybe correcting some of the error there at least.
Yep.
I don't think the program of studies indicates which ones are rotating, and that's probably why, if you're just drawing straight from the program of studies, you wouldn't necessarily know it might be rotating. Okay. Sometimes it's published, and then depending on enrollments, it may or may not run in any given year.
Sure.
So I think that might be part of it, but
Right.
You're right, if we sat down with.
Right, I just don't want it to be looking like we don't offer as much as we do, right? So, So I'm just throwing that out there.
Thanks.
And in the languages, as I said, we've been phasing out Latin. We offer in Spanish and French levels 1 through 5, as well as some additional world language courses that aren't language specific. And our students also have access to a number of online language offerings and independent learning opportunities in world language that we have a fair number of students that take that opportunity. And the rotation is designed so that any student over the course of their 4 years, mapping out their 4-year plan, could maximize their schedule with any of the courses that they wanted in any particular content area. So if they wanted to take all the AP offerings in English and all the AP offerings in science or social studies, the way that the rotation is set up is such that over the course of 4 years, they could get everything they wanted. So it's 12 that rotate, mostly 6 and 6, and designed in a way that a student would be able to take everything offered to them.
So again, this is just kind of looking at current enrollments and averages of classes across these different content areas. So I'll just give you a sec to look at that.
And this data is based on students in the seats this year.
I guess I don't understand that. Math, there's only 18.9 students at MAU in math per class.
That's the average class size
Okay, and how many classes are there?
offered right now in math. So I will give you courses, which doesn't equate to sections. So for example, there's 1, 2, 4 sections of integrated 1 math, but that's 1 course, but 4 sections to get everybody in there. So
So basically, all
So
the kids
14.
all the kids at Mount Abe are taking math in some form or another.
Not necessarily.
not necessarily, I would say if they're a freshman, sophomore, junior, that is likely the case. But there's only 3 requirements, so some may finish sooner. They may not take it their senior year, for example.
And this is 9 through 12?
This is just 9 through 12 data.
So the integrated math that's in 8th grade isn't in that number?
Correct.
Just verifying.
Yep, because we have a teacher from the middle school that is able to teach that. That is part of their teaching assignment. So it's not a shared staff person. Middle school is a little less concrete to look at in terms of teaching assignments and structure because of how we put kids on team and how the cores operate.
Same for Jen's, same teaming structure.
Any other questions about this slide?
This is Ed McGuire.
He hit the mute.
Ed, you went on mute.
Oop. 4 students in personal learning.
So again, that's in personalized learning is a tough one because it's highly variable, but that's the average number of students per section during the day that personalized learning is offered. So some sections may have higher numbers where in others may be lower.
Okay, thanks.
So in kind of thinking about, you know, pros and cons, so we have a pro on the left and a delta on the right. We kind of broke things down by these big areas, if you will, of enrollment, class size, staffing, and programming. And Shannon and I talked through, you know, kind of the pros and cons of merging what that would mean as a potential pro versus a potential con for each of those.
And these are the four big areas that we looked at: enrollment, class size, staffing, and programming. And when we were working on this and reviewing earlier today, it's really a domino effect. So when you look at enrollment, that directly impacts class size, which directly impacts staffing, which directly impacts your programming. So the way that we schedule classes and we determine what runs and what to offer is based on enrollment. And that enrollment includes students signing up for the classes that they want. From there, we get what we call a course tally, and it will say there are 123 students who want to take biology, for example. We then have to determine how many sections are we going to offer of biology that we can staff and that have manageable class sizes. And we do that for every course in every area. And the ones that are lower enrolled, we don't run because it's so few students, and we try to meet their needs in another way. So there are those areas where we really want to run something, or it's on the cusp of being able to run it or not run it. And if there were more students signing up and saying, I really want to take this class, the better chance it has of running. And if we are pooling our students together, those numbers will go up in classes and we would be able to offer more.
So if I can use the word classroom teacher, which I'm not sure that how applicable that is to your data, how many classroom teachers are you projecting to change or reduce from current staffing levels to the merged staffing levels?
Depends on the board's recommendation for budget.
Well, you've made some assumptions here. Are they based on having the same number of instructors as current?
So a year ago in September, Stephanie Taylor and I worked on some projected staffing and what that could look like in terms of if we merged, would we need additional PE teachers, or could we have fewer PE teachers? Would the science teachers that were assigned to high school at both schools be adequate or too many? Or how many would we need based on the enrollment data that we looked at a year ago? So I don't have that staffing information in front of me. So these were just generalized where we see some benefits and where we see some drawbacks in terms of merging.
But I think to follow on Dave's questions, we have it's been inferred, or else we are assuming that there will be some efficiencies and it would affect staff at some level. It would not go up, it would not stay the same. It would likely decrease at some amount.
Yes. Yep. And I can quickly see if I can pull up some of that data.
But if you're running, let's put it this way, 2 AP English classes of 10 at 2 different schools, you're now offering it one time.
Correct.
With 20 people. So there's efficiency that's built in that enhances program, but also it could potentially impact staffing, but maybe not in as negative of a way felt by
Right, it's
the
kind of that,
kids.
yeah, it's that sweet spot between enough to enroll, right, and then that cap.
Right.
It's that if you have a low number in that range, you're absolutely right. You can pool students together to offer the same experience with fewer per pupil teachers, essentially.
So just to go back to this question about, hate the word efficiency applied to people because it's not humane. But if we're talking about, well, we get savings by merging because we have to hire fewer staff. You started this whole presentation by saying you're gonna have to cut the number of staff anyway, if there's no merger. So I guess, I don't know, is there, the question then becomes, and this isn't necessarily for you guys, but for us to think about, are there gonna be more cuts without merging because the schools will be, less financially stable, or more cuts with merging because we'll be able to get rid of redundant classes?
I might offer even a different perspective. My assumption is that reductions in spending, whether that's positions or other things, reduction in spending would need to happen to get tax rates and budgets to be accepted by the community. To me, the question is what's left after those reductions are made. So it's not so much how many positions in this version or that, it's so much what's left intact in terms of programming and support for students after the necessary changes are made. And I actually found a document that it's dated now, because as Shana mentioned, it's probably close to a year and a half old at this point. But at the 9-12 level, and again, this is really just to put in a ballpark, the anticipation was somewhere around 22.9 positions could be reduced while slightly, but increasing program offerings at the same time. So again, that's a difference. So the reductions have to be made. What's left at the end? What would be left in this scenario is similar to slightly enhanced program offerings. And that's 9-12 with another 8.5 positions or so at the middle level.
Jill? I'm sorry, Tracy.
I just wanted to, back to the AP English example, where we talked about 2 classes of 10 students at 2 separate high schools. Those typically singleton course opportunities are really challenging at the high school level, in my experience. And it's not necessarily possible to schedule all of the singletons at separate times so that there aren't conflicts. So although 2 classes of 10 might not be your optimal, if you started with that as an assumption, what you might find is there's more students that would be able to take those if there were more opportunities in the schedule and they didn't have to choose between AP Bio and AP English, and they wanted to go into medicine, so they had to prioritize AP Bio. So that's part of the, the challenge of small schools and small scheduling that can be layered on to thinking about the opportunities that are available.
It really forces students to have to make choices, and sometimes really hard choices when they're looking at maximizing their high school experience if they are in particular going on to further education.
Right. So there's almost multiple levels of, are we going to have access to those opportunities at all? Are we going to have limited access, or are we going to have access where students are more able to make choices about what kinds of pathways they want to pursue when they're in high school?
Well, yeah, this discussion is appropriate because I think, if these comments are made based on, keep having the same staffing we have now, or they're based on having 22 fewer staffing, that's important. And I think at some point, probably not tonight, but at some point, I think we need to have an understanding of what this school would look like, what this high school would look like, how many staff would we have, what course offerings could we make, and how would that differ from what we've got now?
I also just want to say, like, having taught at, that 10-person AP class, just to play, like having that, it's a wonderful experience too within itself. And to give that up is hard too, because you really get to know those students and you get to give those students a really valuable experience of one-on-one attention and that dedication of really honing in on these skills that they need at that moment in time that you wouldn't at that 20 level. So I'm just putting that out there also as something to think about when thinking about 20 versus 10. So.
Thinking about your point, David, I think it's a really good point to try to get a picture of what would this high school look like. And I think there's likely some value in comparing that to what we have now. And I don't know that that's really the comparison we're trying to make. Really what we're trying to make, I think, is what does that high school in the future look like compared to what our high schools in the future will look like if we don't do something, rather than comparing it to now. I think now, comparing to now gives some sort of basis, but really we're comparing possible futures as opposed to a future to current.
Or against some idea.
Right.
What would- If we had our druthers, what would we like the school to look like?
So it feels like we're finally getting to the conversation. I've been asking myself over and over, like, what are we supposed to do? I've been coming to these meetings and we've been talking, and it feels like where the rubber hits the road here, if we're trying to really represent to the community why we would recommend something one way or another, this is it. Like, what are the pluses and what are the minuses? And if you're talking about programming and what we want a school to look like in the future for all of our students in these communities, that's a vision and sort of goes back to what we did in the circles where we talk about our values. But then there's a fiscal responsibility and the ability to pay for it. Like we might know a class of 10 is awesome, but we can't pay for it, right? So it's sort of that coming to the Jesus moment of like, what can we actually pay for when we know we are having a hard time to pay? That's why we're sitting at this table. Otherwise we wouldn't be here, because there'd be plenty of money. We wouldn't be having this discussion. So I feel like this is where we hit, right? And the number one most expensive thing in everybody's budget is the humans. It costs way more than your physical plant and way more than your materials. The humans are the most expensive resource. And I'm a human resource. I mean, we all are wherever we work, right? So I get that part, and that's where the discussion gets difficult, but I think that's the discussion we're really having is how do we get to these efficiencies to create a vision in a place that we feel really, really good about as all of our community, to create something that we feel really, really good about that still meets the expectations needed around fiscal responsibility. And it feels like this is where we're starting to really have this conversation, and I don't know how we struggle through this next. But I'm glad, like, this feels like, all right, boom, we're finally popping the top off, and like, this is what we need to do. Because we looked at all the transportation numbers and yada, 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 and it was like, there was no compelling reason there for me to think we should merge, right? You know, and I'm like, okay. So like, I need something to like convince me that this is in everybody's benefit. And I feel like this is where we're gonna start to really finally realize, what can we offer our students at a cost that we can afford in perpetuity for a while. So we're not constantly eliminating courses, adding courses, eliminating staff, adding staff, that there's some continuity in programming. I don't know, I'm excited for this part of it, even though it's hard.
I would add that there's an equity lens as well to look at. You know, as administrators, when we're looking at the master schedule, we often have to make really hard choices, and that may be running a class of 10 for AP students or running some sort of intervention for students who are struggling that can meet the needs of more students. So there are competing needs that sort of overlay all of this, and we're often faced with those decisions that don't feel good as administrators because they often feel inequitable, because we have students that aren't meeting their proficiency levels, so we're pouring resources into them. But we have students on this end who sometimes then don't get their needs met, which is to push on and push further because of the competing needs. But to be able to pool resources would give us more equity across the board because we would have fewer competing needs. So I think that that's important to think about as well when you're looking at programs, is that you're looking at programs for all students and what that could look like.
Could you talk a little bit about what the pros and cons or possibilities and challenges of having a middle school program that is not intertwined with the high school and perhaps has dedicated administration and dedicated staff. In my experience, things like scheduling specialists like music programs across middle and high school with one person can drive all of the other learning opportunities. And I wonder if you've thought about that and what you see as possibilities and positives and what's not good.
So some positives are certainly that you get that, Troy was talking about continuity of learning. You get some continuity with your instructors within certain areas. If we're talking about world language, if we're talking about music. Some of the challenges with shared staff are around scheduling and what you're able to offer and when. And the way that you set up the schedules, like this big game of Sudoku, and if you move this, then you have to move 3 more things to try to get this one to fit, and it doesn't always work. So something has to fall off. And it's usually the middle school that loses out because high school students are trying to meet proficiency attainment to get credit to graduate. So when we have shared staff, it does in sometimes offer us some flexibility in offerings, but when we have to share them in some areas, for example, we have an English teacher who's teaching middle school and a high school class, and that creates a lot of conflicts with the schedule, and everything had to be built around that, and not as many kids were able to get in. And that's really tricky, and again, falls back to making hard decisions that sometimes feel inequitable. Having a middle school with its own staff and you determine what you want to offer, you staff that to meet that, as opposed to what we're doing is the other way around. We're offering things in middle school based on sort of what we have for additional staffing in the high school in terms of those special areas. It's not the other way around, which if we're thinking forward and we're thinking what's best for our kids for a well-rounded education, there would be, a dedicated language teacher, a dedicated music teacher, things like that, to make sure that all kids could access that. And that's not the way it is now. It's whatever's left over, we can then dedicate to the middle school, and not every kid can access it.
And those are really tough positions to hold when you're working in essentially 2 schools.
I can't hear you, Tracy.
Oh, they're really tough positions to hold or to fill for teachers, because you're in 2 schools. You can't attend 2 faculty meetings and really be connected and engaged with the school-wide expectations when you're shared staff across multiple buildings. Sometimes that's still the very best that can be done, but in terms of attracting and retaining teachers and helping them feel happy and supported and like their needs are met so that they can meet student needs, it's something to think about. Okay.
So I kind of coupled with that conversation, in the Delta column underneath staffing, it alludes to the fact that there's an option to either have them separate or together. And I have been under the impression that you couldn't fit a middle high school situation either here in Virginia or in Bristol. So you're almost driven to have separate facilities for those 2 functions. Is that fair or not?
I don't think that's what that comment is saying. I think it's talking about the actual staff. So if you work in both the middle school and the high school, now you are going between 2 buildings. Is that what that's saying?
Okay.
I could be misinterpreting that, but.
Right, so if one building is in
Here.
Bristol and one's in Virginia, if there is a need for shared staffing, there's a commute that would have to happen.
Right.
So
The staff.
Shannon, you're
And for
saying
some of
there's
the-
going to be less of a need because there's more students, so more dedicated staff.
But conversely, we can't put everybody in. Pardon me?
We wouldn't, I don't think that's what it's saying. This isn't about putting them all in one building. It's about putting the middle school in one building and the high school in the other.
I'm sort of understanding that. So from a staffing point of view, I'm sort of also reading in there that it's alluding to the fact that if you had all the people in one building,
there's some things that you don't have to deal with, but I don't believe, I'm just bringing it out to state, maybe it's stating the obvious, but we aren't in a situation where we can put everybody in one building. I don't believe.
I think
Say
Mount
7
Abe,
through 12 in one
building?
Mount Abe has had in the past just under 1,000 students, 712 in its facility. And if you look at the enrollment projections in a few years, it's going to be just under 1,000. So it would be full, but there's historical evidence to suggest that Mount Abe can hold that number of students. I don't know about Virginia.
What is the capacity of the buildings?
Just pull up the NASDAQ study.
I think NASDAQ said Mount Abe was right around 1,000.
It also says, though, to like plan on not filling to capacity, right? Like,
Yeah, I just,
10%
we haven't ever
buffer, yeah.
discussed the capacity of buildings and what is.
I will say, because I was hired to Mount Abe right around that time, and at that time, you know, we had some like trailer classrooms that have been removed since. We also weren't able to schedule every kid into a class, so even ninth graders had unassigned time, free blocks. And because we didn't have the space to put them all in a class, and I really wouldn't want to go back to that. I don't think it was good for kids that age to not be in a class learning somewhere.
Oh,
I think when our boys went to Mount Abe, there was around 850 students there, and they didn't have to use a trailer, so I think that might be a more realistic number to work with.
And then if we add if we make a middle school, which is 6 to 8, all of a sudden you're increasing that over what, the 7 or 9 population that we're looking at right now.
Erica, I just want to say, in terms of the advantage of having a separate sort of complete middle school, reminded me of one of the people who was in my group at the last meeting who had been a teacher, and her perspective was that when she went into a school that was a little bit larger than her previous school that she'd been teaching at, it was much more rewarding for her because there was a whole team of staff there with her. There was more opportunity to get feedback and to share ideas and to work together. And so it seems to me like a middle school that was a combined middle school of our two districts would have more of that. Like if the middle school here right now was off on its own, that might be too small, but if it was both middle schools together, it might be big enough to have that kind of shared community.
Just for the data, 04 to 08, Mount Abe had in the 970s range, you know. And some of those things that you laid out might have been in that.
Yeah, it was. I was hired in 04.
I think that line of thinking, and as you were talking about, as we do think about the future, as Patrick said, like in terms of just retaining staff, attracting staff, professional development with your staff, like to be able to think about appropriate thematic units or whatever our vision and mission statement for the students are, like in light of what's ever happening in the world, like to be able to do that with a group of kids who are all very close in age versus trying to straddle and commingle buildings, like it's a huge difference between an 18-year-old boy and girl and a 12-year-old boy and girl, as we already know in these buildings, which has for a long time been a question of whether we should be doing it at all, but it's been what we've done. But in some ways, I think one of the pluses is to think about what are the huge advantages potentially of having a program and a curriculum and a whole mentality that is geared for that group of students, and not, you know, sometimes you used to go to the game and your kids were wearing the varsity uniforms from 8 years ago. Like, that's not thoughtful planning for a middle schooler. That's just, oh, that's what's left over and that's what we got. And so to have students at that age be a priority and really have their own space and place, I think would be a huge benefit to all communities. And there could be a huge amount of potential there, you know, having their own play, having their own, like, all of their own stuff, it's theirs. It's not just, oh, I'm a middle schooler added into the big play as an extra. I mean, that's only one example, but there's many.
Sarah, before I go to you, did you guys have more to present?
No, I think we
Okay.
were just to questions.
Great.
Q&A, which,
I just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure. Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Sarah.
Something that I would, regardless of what occurs, that I appreciated I went to Middlebury when it was a 7 through 12. And I had 3 credits when I went into high school. And my own kid is in 8th grade and will potentially have 2 credits when she goes into 9th grade. And that appeals to me to kind of maintain some things like that, because I think it really helps with, one, the PLP and what you could be doing to like kind of individualize what you did later on and where it's appropriate in different areas. And so working in a district that doesn't have a 7 through 12, none of our students come in with any of that kind of experience. And there is something nice, and they're all coming from all different 8th grades. So in some ways, our 9th grade is like a middle school. And I like that we've at least had some kind of a middle school experience going into the high school, but there is a nice like flow and transition straight to the high school. So that would be something I wouldn't want to lose, I think, when I say that out loud, is just a little bit of that continuity that I think is actually in our 2 school systems.
And I think a lot of that can be addressed in the logistics of the programming when it gets mapped out, as to if that is a desire of a designated middle school, regardless of where it exists, just conceptually middle school, that there be some higher level offerings that were credit bearing or that students could attain proficiency. It's a matter of those teachers working with the teachers teaching the same course at the high school level to align their proficiencies and their expectations, calibrate their scoring so that that could still happen. It just takes some collaboration on behalf of the teachers.
Another way to approach that is, and I think, you know, we've already had great suggestions in terms of moving 6th graders into the middle school. Where I went to school in the Midwest, there was junior high was 7, 8, and 9, and then high school was 10, 11, and 12, and that would give high school credits to middle school students. You know, so how the grade configurations work, I know that's very anti-Northeast to think of it that way. That is a possibility.
Just wanted to check, Sheila, were there any questions?
Yeah, and I asked a question about building capacity, which I think was partially addressed in Patrick's comments, and I was just trying to scroll through our NASDAQ study so that I could give the accurate figure. You talked about how many were there, but what did NASDAQ say about capacity for you? I think ours was 876, I think. We'll pull that up, Ed, so you have it.
And anything else from anybody, any of the members participating remotely? Did you have any other questions? Okay, great. Erica?
I just have one embarrassing question, which is because I didn't do my homework. And I honestly don't know, is there a separate building for the middle school, Mommy? Or is it all in the same building with the high school?
We're all in the same building,
Okay, thank you.
Separate wing,
Okay,
similar to
similar
here, right?
Okay.
sort of, yeah, for the most part,
Lots of shared
ish, yeah.
Separate.
A lot of high school in the middle school.
There's no
Yeah.
separate gym.
or cafeteria.
Somebody shared around, I'm trying to find it, but there was, it was an article that was about K through 8 schools. And there was some compelling stuff in there, I thought, about schools in Chicago that were moving away from middle school model, like, typical 5 through 8 configuration, towards K-8 schools and seeing some really good results for it. And I won't get into all the things of why that may be better, but I think it's something worth considering. And I'm also just curious, like, what would an option like that look like in a merger for our school?
All right, thanks. Really appreciate you guys providing that information, really helpful to all of us.
You're welcome.
And we have the capacity information here. We just found it.
Go ahead, Patrick.
So for Mount Abe, so NESDEC talked about the total capacity. And then as Sheila mentioned before, they recommended, like, don't plan to have that total capacity because you're going to be really bursting at the seams and there's no room for anybody to move in, et cetera. So the total capacity, according to NESDEC study for Mount Abe, was 1,338. Backing up from that,
All the schools together?
Mount Abe,
Oh.
middle high school.
That's with the current, Patrick, with the very current configuration of classrooms and spaces, or has anything been remodeled since then?
No, so when they did this study, the trailers that were referenced weren't there. And of course, that middle school addition has been there, so it's as it sits currently. So what they're referring to as the real operating number to work with, which is less than that full capacity, would be 1,003.
And do you have that for Virgins?
Yes, for us, the larger number based on rooms and student stations as they've defined them as 1,031, but their recommendation at 85% capacity is 876.
And how might those numbers, we visited a school, in the USD board visited a school last meeting, where they talked about converting space because they needed, for COVID purposes, they needed testing. And so, and the social emotional piece has been more a growing part of the responsibility of schools. So how is that, the NASDAQ study was pre-COVID, right? And so those numbers might be, in reality, might be smaller than what they reported.
Yes, I think that's fair. And NESDEC did make an effort to account for some of that, again, pre-COVID, looking at the way in which some spaces and buildings are currently used. And through conversations with building principals and others, trying to get a sense of how much of that might be expected to continue going forward. And so they factored that into yet another number. So for the Mount Abe figures, it went from the 1,338 total, if you fill it to the brim and don't have any of those other spaces, down to the 970 if we kind of back that off to what might be a reasonable capacity, or sorry, to 1,003, and then back that down to 970, accounting for some of that other use, which I would say it would probably drop even a little bit more from the 970, based on some of the things you just mentioned.
Great.
Still a lot of capacity compared to now, right?
Sure. Well, and that's, again, to your point earlier, that's why we're here. We have
Well,
a lot fewer students
are
than we
empty,
had.
yeah,
and-
so.
Yeah.
I was just gonna bring that up, that like, as someone who works in a high school where we're at rather capacity, I'm in 4 different classrooms, and all of my classrooms are used, they're not mine, are used every single block with someone in a group of students. And so that is a really different experience for a teacher to not have their own classroom versus in a high school where you could have your own space, and there are teachers in our school that have that, but in a science room, there's not many, and and our kids are not in class all the time. Because it's not just a building capacity, it's a staffing capacity about where they would be. And so we have to account for that as well.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, we're going to review and try to synthesize the material from the community forum and the survey information. Before we go to the next topic, I know Ed McGuire, Ed, you had a comment in here, and just in the spirit of open meeting law, if you could just share that comment with everyone.
Well, I said that I really feel that the 7-8 model that I experienced firsthand was the best way to transition 6th graders to the middle school and 8th graders to the high school. It has changed a lot over the years, but we adapted it. The number of teams depended on the number of students, the shared staff, all of that did work, but it was tough. Ideally, the middle schoolers would be in their own building. Mixing with high schoolers, we used to call it trolling. 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds mixing with 12 and 13-year-olds isn't always the best way to do things if you can avoid it.
Thanks, Ed. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to go over the next agenda item.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. So, shifting gears, we, at your last meeting, gathered input from community members in response to key questions that may help guide future decision-making. And we followed up with an online survey so that anyone who couldn't attend could share their voice, and anyone who had more to say than they could share during that forum would have an opportunity to add to what they shared in person. I'm going to give you paper copies of that in a few minutes, in just a minute, but I know better than to hand it out now because I want you to pay attention to what I'm saying. Just wanted to show you some of the summary feedback about the event in general. You can see that we had, let me go up, 209 total responses. 205 people gave us feedback about how they learned about the event. And you'll see that email, word of mouth, and the district websites were the most popular. I did not go in and try. There's a lot of individual from Porch Forum, Facebook, social media, but I think not enough to compare to those big three. So that's just an interesting learning for the committee, boards, and administrators as well, in terms of how people get information. In terms of the people who completed this survey, 58 of the people who completed the survey, 58 of the 209, attended the meeting, and they went on to give us some feedback about the meeting. In terms of the response overall to the event, it certainly leans towards the positive side. People reported that they had the opportunity to meet new people virtually and to get to know members of the community, which was one of the outcomes we were interested in. People reported that they had the opportunity to share their thoughts on key issues related to the future of the schools in the region positively. And the feedback about the restorative circle process was also positive. So overwhelmingly, I think that's pretty good feedback and testament to the good work that you did and your thoughtfulness in planning opportunities for people to come together virtually and to be heard. And special thanks to the producer, Sheila, who made it all happen. I am going to hand out hard copies of the narrative responses that people typed in the rest of the survey. There were each question had different numbers of respondents, but, up to, this one had 165, so people didn't have to respond to everything. But that's a lot of narrative feedback. We will mail the hard copies to those of you who were not here. I am handing them out in hard copy because it's a tremendous amount of information. And I have not screened it for any information that might be personally identifiable about an individual student or something that might be evaluative about an employee, neither of which we should be sharing broadly. So I ask you to handle this information with care and just be respectful, given that it's not been redacted, if that kind of information is included. What I'd like to do is,
Point of order,
yes,
if you hand that out, doesn't it become public information and anybody can actually request it?
they could, and then I would have somebody put the time into redacting it and sharing it.
You'd be permitted to redact it even though it was presented here non-redacted?
That's what we would do, yes.
I don't know the rules, I'm
Yeah.
just inquiring, I don't want to
Yeah.
put ourselves at risk.
I didn't see any.
Totally fair.
Okay.
And Lori did read it in depth and doesn't see a lot, didn't see anything from her perspective that needed redacting, so thank you for doing that. I just wanted to be cautious and be respectful.
Yeah, and let's make sure that after we do our work today, we collect those.
So the work for the next chunk of time until about, somewhere I jotted a time, until about 8 o'clock. My hope had been to pair you up and give you each give it to each team one of the questions and invite you to choose one of 3 options, and I have kits for each question. One of 3 options to really synthesize the feedback that we got from the forums and from the survey. One thing that is in your kit is nearly 200 slips of paper with each of the comments on it. One strategy can be to just spread out and group the feedback into themes with the goal of synthesizing that into themes. Also in your packet is a complete copy of the survey results, an extra copy, which you can, and there's markers, and you could highlight and color code by themes and whatever method works for you on that. And the third option is there's just a tablet of paper and you can list themes as you go. You can also do a combination of those things. But the goal would be to spend a good chunk of time focused on one particular question and looking for the themes and synthesizing the feedback that we heard from the community groups. I also have for each of you the notes from that each group took in their breakout session in the forum, which you can peruse for your particular question. So there are 7 questions, and oh, yeah, sorry.
Excuse me.
There are 7 questions, and there are
4 pairs.
You want to do 2 questions, or I was thinking it's quite a bit of information, 1 question per group.
There's only 4 groups then.
If we helped, and it was one of us, then I think we can pull off 7 groups. So anybody want to come up and grab a packet and get started? We'll come back together at 8 o'clock.
So excited.
And be prepared to report out a little bit in a minute or so what the synthesis from your group looks like so far.
And let's have a merger study committee member in each of the groups.
Yes. So grab a partner.
I'm going.
And for at least one merger study committee member,
Follow her.
and grab a kit.
Grabbing a kit.
This is part of it.
Yeah.
Oh, Sarah.
Oh, yeah, and we need Sarah. So for those who were not able to hear the end of the work session portion of the meeting, committee members are going to spend additional time between now and the next meeting looking at the feedback that we received in the forum breakout groups and via the online survey. They will be reflecting in particular on specific questions, and at the next meeting, we will be reviewing and updating the synthesis and the themes that were identified in response to each of those questions and reporting out on those at that time.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, we're going to open the discussion up for selection of governance structure for modeling. This is so that the district can start modeling what we determine to be, as a group, the best structure. It's not set in stone, but we need to start moving towards modeling. For this discussion, what I'd like to do is have everybody talk rather than sort of jumping around. And I also want to make sure we get everybody, all the committee members who are on Zoom, an opportunity to speak as well. Kevin, you good to start at your end of the room on this discussion? And Tracy has a few words first.
Just a few words. Really, what we're looking for is direction as far as unified union or a union high school or union school in a supervisory union structure.
This
We're-
thing?
Yes, and I was going to,
So can you show us that again?
I have it right here.
The more times I look at it, the less confident I only know what they mean.
Yeah.
So looking at it again would be helpful.
Yeah, really semi-helpful, I don't know.
So the two options are, I'm just going to use, we had different versions of the two options, so I'm just going to use the two that are close in my presentation. One option is a union school option with a union school for some grades, and this one had, you know, if somebody withdrew. But, so that's more of what I call the spaghetti governance structure. And the second option, so let me explain this one because it's more convoluted. It's a supervisory union with a board budget and an administration. There is still an Addison Northwest school district that serves some schools and has a board budget and a budget. There's still a Mount Abraham Union District that governs and serves some students in some schools. And then there would be a new union district with a board and budget that serves some combination of grades. And in that soup, the State Board of Ed could add districts that might have withdrawn. So that's what this model shows.
There's 3 boards.
Not less than 3 boards, not less than 4 boards in that structure, not less than 4. And remember, that's the one where I gave you a 1-pager that said, these are all the things that make it a chicken and egg kind of situation. You wouldn't know what your supervisory union structure, for example, is until you'd already approved it and gone to the State Board of Ed. So it's a tricky one procedurally.
And Tracy, are folks clear that means for budgets and for audits and?
Yes, 4 sets of policies, 4 contracts.
Not unlike our prior governance structure,
Pre-Act 46.
pre-Act 46, right?
And so the second one is the Unified Union School District, where there's one school district with one board, one budget, one administration that governs and runs all of the schools of what is now both Addison Northwest and Mount Abraham. So one egg or 4 or more overlapping. And I want to be clear that this isn't a decision that you're recommending this, either of those options at this time. This is based on what we know, the option that we think best, that might best present, be the best alternative to the current state in the future is, which one of those, so that then we can dive into actually modeling it, creating the articles of agreement, and then doing the pros and cons and cost benefit analysis, looking at that proposed structure with your current structure going forward in the future and what you might recommend.
Okay, with that, any questions before we start the discussion?
Just to clarify.
Yep.
Are we allowed to look at some of the other, or say some of the other, like do we have to really go to 2A, or can we just say 2? Or whatever?
You're going to, we need you to choose a direction between the union school structure
Okay.
or the unified union school district.
Okay.
Unified union district. I'm not going to use the word school with that one. Unified union district. The permutations within that are examples of what could happen. Some of that is also outside of the control of this body or the electorate of the regions.
Okay, I would promote the unified union, the single egg. I think, and there's pros and cons to each, obviously, but I think the overriding thing for me is with multiple school boards, you will end up with competing agendas, if you will, of each school board. And that will affect the continuity, particularly of the elementary schools, feeding into the middle and the high school. You know, there are a lot of people that think central office is too big now and it'll just get bigger, and that's a big problem. But I personally don't see that as an issue. I think that's a necessary thing to provide the continuity across what would be 10 elementary schools, to provide the best, most equal quality education at those levels to feed in seamlessly to a junior high and then ultimately to high school.
I'd add, just from thinking about equity for students too, I feel like fewer eggs would be better. You could
So,
achieve that better.
You want to,
Same as Karen, I'd say I think it's called the Unified Union District with one egg.
yeah. Did anything else you want to add to that?
You know, just that. I mean, I think sometimes you can have separate boards with competing interests, and you know, one thing that's important for me in this is equity for students across all the schools within the district. I think you're going to get that best with one body that's making the decisions with that as part of the mission.
Yeah, I'd also go with, I guess we're calling it the one egg option. I see the ease of it and the clarity of it. Also, I think about if that's 3 boards and 3 different,
would that be 3 different contracts across, no, just one contract? So each,
Not necessarily.
not necessarily for the teachers?
It'd probably be one contract.
If there's,
There's the Mount Aid contract, the Edison Northwest contract.
Not if we're
Would you
one-
clarify that for me?
In the one egg or in the
And
other?
that's other,
In the
Oh,
spaghetti.
In
In
the
the
spaghetti,
spaghetti.
it would be multiple contracts.
yeah, so that's a no, that's like a really, that's a red flag for me, because then people, it would be very difficult for people, so there'd be competition there. And you wouldn't be, I just feel like it would be better under a one egg contract.
Eggs or spaghetti is really.
Really?
Yep, egg or spaghetti, that's the one.
One contract per egg.
Right.
Mary, what are your thoughts?
I'm in complete agreement. I don't want to see a situation where we have an A school and a B school. And we have some teachers that make more, even though we're all part of the same school district. It just doesn't seem like it would do anything positive.
Erica?
I also think that the unified union district model seems to make the most sense and to offer the most support to staff and students. But I worry also about having just one board. It might have to be quite an awfully large board in order to represent every town. It's a really big district. It covers a lot of ground. And so I feel like that's a challenge, but that would still exist even if it were separate boards competing against each other. So I just, like, my only hesitancy is I want to be really clear that for the elementary schools, if they're gonna be in your town, they're not moving anywhere, but you might have fewer people speaking on their behalf to the board. And we should just be cognizant of that.
I would echo everything everybody said, and I think that last point is really important to think about. We would get control over what the board looks like, right? And the size, and I think clearly school districts are doing this already, and across the country, massive ones the size of our whole state. That doesn't mean it's better or right, it just means it's being done. So we can do it, but I think it's also important to remember who we are and where we are and some of those values and things we hold really important about our small communities and keeping voice. It was very clear in the one question we were looking at that people really want to believe that they can trust everybody and that we're all doing the right thing and that there's transparency and there's really clear communication, and we don't want to lose that. So I think you can have one board, but it doesn't mean you couldn't have a whole bunch of committees. I don't know, like there's a lot of ways you can get input and get things to happen. But I think overall, logistically, why would anybody want to take a job where they're answering like no business would want that structure, and part of this is a business on one end to serve the purpose you're talking about, which was equity for all students and outcomes for students. And there is a business part of it and there's a human part of it. And we have to make sure we're answering to both of those. That's a long way to say, I think the right way to do that is the egg, where we're not distracted and pulled in 10 different directions all over the place.
Dave?
So this is tough for me, having been an author of Act 46 that moved us all away from supervisory unions into unified districts, of which Virgins and Bristol are now unified districts. And it's not surprising to me that the administrators in the room, including our consultant, present the spaghetti multi-egg option in negative terms. Supervisory unions have served Vermont well for 50 years. Our kids have gotten good educations, and has been complicated through superintendents, no doubt. I am very concerned about some students spending 90 minutes on a bus. Although a unified school district doesn't necessarily mean a single middle school or a single high school. I think the implication is that it means that. I think that the towns that I represented in the legislature and that will vote on this, 4 of the 5 towns in the Mount Abe district, feel very strongly about local elementary schools. And unless there were ironclad provisions in the Articles of Agreement that gave towns the power to keep their local schools, I don't think it would pass. I don't think the unified district would pass. I think the supervisory union offers the consolidation of the administration, 1 superintendent, 1 curriculum director, 1 special ed director. So there'd be the equity and the uniformity that we seek from the central office. Not talking about 10 boards, we're talking about 4, 3 directly related to schools, 1 elementary school board for the current Mount Abe district, 1 elementary school board for the current Jens district, and 1 higher ed, or secondary school board for the combined districts, and a supervisory union board. It is, no doubt, it's more complicated to administer. And there are definite advantages to uniformity in a unified district. And we've seen that according to our school reports here in this committee. We've heard that kids coming into Virgins High School and Mount Abe have more level and consistent readiness for the high school experience. That instead of being 5 schools going each with their own board in our district, it would mean 1 elementary board in Mount Abe, so we could continue to see consistencies and equity across our elementary schools, I believe. So I think I'm the outlier here. I come down on the supervisory union, even though I wrote out 46.
I like the unified union school district. I have always tried to think about all of the other things as like problems to solve. But when it comes straight up to a governance structure, I 100% think this is the way to go. I think that I like to look at it as a long-term solution to governance versus how can we make this occur. I agree there are some challenges that would need to be addressed to have the voting body, all of it. I think this was a good option, I guess, but I think this is a good option if I had to choose one. So that's my choice.
Ed?
Thanks, Mary Kate. As I put in the chat, I'm strongly in favor of the unified union school district. Simpler is better, in my view. putting the resources in the hands of the leadership to provide better program opportunities, learning opportunities for students is really where I'm going. And being able to manage that well is the key for me.
Thanks. Keith?
I also theoretically support the unified district model. I think on paper, for all the reasons, I won't rehash what everyone has said, but for educational purposes, for governance reasons, it makes the most sense. I have some serious reservations about how easily that would be received by the communities and how easily that would be passed if it came to a vote. So I do have, I really think that one of the things that came out of the engagement event that we did was that local control very much means as local as possible to a lot of people. And I think that this model flies in the face of that in a lot of people's view. So I think a lot of the work ahead of us, if this is a model that we did present to the community, would be we'd have a lot of heavy lifting on community engagement ahead of us to try to I don't want to say sell, because that's not really quite what I mean, but in order to help communities understand this and make a decision on as to whether or not they really wanted it.
Carol?
No, I completely agree with almost everyone about the unified district. There's fewer complexities, though I do see the trials ahead of us in trying to make sure that the community understands why we're picking this option, because it is to some people going to look like a loss of local control. So we do have to be very careful in how we present this decision going forward and really justifying why it is best for our students.
Brad, are you with us? Okay.
Yes, I am. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm experiencing a little bit of cognitive dissonance in this discussion. I don't know, and that's probably my limitation. But since I really don't have a good sense of what the it is when we are talking about the sort of an educational sort of configuration in the future, I have a hard time kind of figuring out which governance structure might make sense, because I would think that the governance structure would flow from what we want to do, as opposed to the other way around. So in some respects, putting up a question, the spaghetti system or the unified, single egg is a bit of a false choice in my mind. So I personally, am not prepared to endorse either of those options. Although if pressed, I think that my sensibilities would lean a little bit more towards the comments that Dave Sharp made.
Thanks, Brad. I'll just speak briefly to share my point of view on this. I'm supportive of the unified district. I agree with Erica that, and I think Troy and other people, that the whole issue of local voice and local control are issues. I see those issues in our communities being more about towns wanting to have a voice, and rather than the Mount Abe Union School District or the Regents District wanting to have a voice. So, that would mean if we're looking at the SU structure, going back to having, 12 different, 13 different districts, and I just see that as not manageable. I do think having one unified district also will help to consolidate administration, which in some of the feedback from the community I was looking at, that was an important piece. So I think for those reasons, I think the local control issue, I see that issue, again, being a town issue, but also being really focused on, we want to have a voice in whether our schools are closed. I also think what I've seen through the Mount Abe School Board, while there was a lot of dissension around the closing of school issues, the board actually came to a decision that listened to the voice of the community, and that while I think there was fear that people wouldn't be listened to, the result was that people were listened to. But I do think, trying to find ways to give people voice will be important as we move forward. So do we want to, is this something we want to have a vote on? Yeah.
I know we've already gone around, and not to muddy the waters, but can I ask a clarifying question? In my mind, is this true? Currently, the two supervisory unions, what do we have right now?
Districts.
Supervisory districts, each have one board that serves all of their people. The only difference is that each group would still have one board. They wouldn't lose a board. They would each still have just one board, but it'd be governing a larger group of students. If you went to the one egg.
You wouldn't each have a board. There wouldn't be.
No, there'd be one board. No, but I guess by default, you already have a board. You wouldn't lose one. You still have one. You already have one board. You still have one. So in essence, nothing would change except for the number of students.
It's the same governance structure.
It's the same governance structure we have right now.
It just has more towns in it.
Just has more towns in it.
That's it.
Okay, because I feel like there's a tension that we're losing something. But that model, we wouldn't lose anything because all of those towns are already represented on one board.
You'd have to determine the makeup
Of the
of how
board.
many representatives are on the
But
board.
that is accurate, right? That, what I just explained in my own head?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I
It's
just
really
wanted,
actually a nice way of putting it.
okay, I just wanted to,
Thanks.
okay.
I do, just to clarify something, Brad kind of talked about this too, because, if we're gonna sort of decide what governance structure we're recommending, are we deciding that we're recommending that governance structure as part of our we haven't yet decided whether we're even recommending we merge or not, but this is, if we were to merge, this would be what the governance structure would look like. And that's how we're putting it.
This is what we want to model at this time, because the majority of us feel that this is, if we were going to recommend what it, at this point in time, seems like we're supportive of recommending. That makes sense?
Yes, it does. Because I did hear Brad say it, and it made sense to me when he said it, that kind of, the governance structure that you decide you want is, you kind of need to you want that to align with what you're going to ultimately do. How are you going to restructure these buildings and be sending kids? And that's not something I feel ready to do yet. As I imagine, a lot of people don't feel ready yet to do, but I am comfortable to say that, okay, if we were to recommend, not ready to recommend that yet, but if we were to recommend a merger, this is the governance structure I think would make most sense for that. And
Perfect. So
that's accurate.
So does that mean, so what my understanding is that we're saying our task is to decide whether or not to recommend merging. In order to do that, we have to have a model that we can then recommend or not. So we're saying today, here's the model we'd like to see if we want to recommend it or not. Yes. My question then is, if the model is produced and we think, oh, it's not what we thought it was going to be, we really don't like this, do we have another model? Or is that like, meaning that's the end of it and we aren't going to recommend it?
I would, based on the way statute is written right now, regulation is written right now, you have the two options that we reviewed. And I reviewed that with the Agency of Education to make sure I was really solid. So I would suggest that at the end of this study process, if you wrote articles of agreement and created and projected the pros and cons, projected your financial outcomes in a more specific way, and articulated the opportunities for students, and you came to the end of it and said, we do not recommend going forward with the unified union, this study would be done. And you could go back and then initiate a study process to develop articles of agreement and model the other option that you have, or if perhaps something happened legislatively, I don't know what would happen.
I'm just confused because, so you're saying this study would be done, would this committee be then dissolved and a new committee would have to be formed?
I would think so.
Dave?
So to Brad's point and to a comment that Patrick made earlier about what's a vision? What do we want to see our schools look like? Where do we want to be 10 years from now? So that vision is going to be baked into this because we're going to start identifying grade levels. Is it going to be high school in Bristol and middle school here? And is it going to be one elementary school for the Bristol district at Bristol Elementary and one elementary school for Virgins and the Virgins Elementary School? Is that what we're looking at as a vision in the future?
I don't think we've figured out what our vision is. Sarah?
Additionally, when we went through Act 46, a lot of those sometimes decisions were not decisions that we made as a committee, that we left for our board to make. And so there were options in there about, this is the governance model. We just slashed central office in half for our two districts, and that's all we accomplished. We could have it, be like in 3 years, I'm making this up, you could have a plan that you need to have addressed the plan for the high school, but that we didn't actually come up with the plan for the high school. So we could have, am I right about this? I'm just clarifying. We might be able to be in a position where we don't have to have every detail worked out, that we could have a menu or some options that might have, I would give it a timestamp, but from personal experience, but a few things like that. I don't know.
I was thinking the same thing, Sarah. It's important to remember this isn't the governing body of the new district if it's created. That will be formed, and it's important to know the language of the Articles of Agreement can more or less handcuff that governing body that will be formed later. And there's some intentionality and thought that goes into how the articles are written to achieve what this group wants in that regard.
Because if we said we wanted to have a 7 through 12 school, and that's what gets voted on in one of them or something, then that's kind of what you're held to, unless, or 2 7 through 12 schools to, stay as they are, and you need to continue to go to school where you go to school. You don't want to have that in writing for, like, whatever the word is, that means forever. Thank you, that's the word.
Troy?
We're not writing those articles, are we?
We are writing
We
these
are.
articles.
Oh.
That's part of what
That's
But
why
how
we have the
detailed the
direction.
articles are.
I'd entertain a motion if anybody's prepared to do that.
So just to drag it out a little bit further, Erica had asked us the question if we could change our modeling strategy midstream. And I understood you, Tracy, to say, no, we have to carry this out to the end. And if we decide we don't want to do it, we can't change our mind. And it would require another study committee.
I just suspect that the amount that it's beyond the capacity of this committee to design two structures
In the time frame.
in the time frame that we have.
But I would think I don't think parallel, but potentially serial, particularly if we get down through halfway through this thing. And I can't envision personally, from my point of view, we would change our mind, but there are some reservations.
Yeah.
So if we
You
get
know, yeah.
2/3 of the way through and it's just like, oh, this isn't gonna work, and
We could rewrite an article,
we could change the government.
which we haven't voted on yet.
I can, through the Articles of Agreement, help you be aware of the kinds of things that would have to be decided for the supervisory union structure, so that you know what to expect. And yes, you know, you could decide partway through that this isn't a palatable pathway.
So I'm still unclear where we're going. We're not going to say, to Sarah's question, we're not going to design any grades going to any buildings. It's just going to be governance. Is that what the notion is? And then that new board is going to decide whether to have one high school and one middle school?
We
Or
have
are we
to
going to make
decide-
that part of our decision making?
We have to decide those things, whether or not we want to have control or not,
So we will be deciding that,
whether to or not.
whether
If
to
we
what?
do- Whether to have certain grade configurations or buildings or those sort of things. Or to leave it up to the board.
Okay.
One other clarifying question, just if we were an SU, not a unified district, just thinking of it from the point of view of a faculty or staff person, say you were part-time sort of in Bristol and part-time at Virgins. What would that look like? Would you potentially have a different, like, negotiated agreement contract that you're working under in each?
Yeah.
And principals at each building would have to sort of work out how they would share you?
Yeah,
And
potentially.
Unless you're specialized.
That was widely done in the past, and often the employees, some districts like Bennington had over 500 people were under the contract of the supervisory union. So they were under a single contract and then were allocated to various schools. Other, like Middlebury School District, they had contracts where the individual might be a librarian in one district for 2 days and a librarian in another district for 3 days. And that was what the contract was with the supervisory union, but their responsibility was to the principals in those buildings on those days. So there are lots of different ways.
would there be a way, now say, because when we were ANWSD, we had several different towns all with different boards, but there was one negotiated agreement that was negotiated between representatives from all the boards and a teachers union that had representation from all the schools, so that everybody was working under the same contract. Now, if that were done, of course, it would take a lot of collaboration, which takes a lot of work to do to achieve that. But even if you achieve that, would that teacher still be getting, they'd be getting a pay stub from Addison Northwest and one from MAUSD, or would it come from one?
It depends answer, right? And Dave's right, you can have, ideally, by law, you're supposed to, in a supervisory union, attempt to negotiate a single agreement. So the terms of the agreement could be the same. However, someone's employer, who someone's employer is, would depend on the specific terms of the negotiated agreement and whatever arrangements were made between employing entities. So it depends.
Okay.
And we'll get into that and we'll talk about how to handle contracts in the transition to a new entity. And we can talk about some of the variables.
I only ask just because I'm thinking, you know, you know, if we're worried about people who want more local control not going for, or not liking the single egg option of one unified district, and we want to maintain our two separate districts but work together, what could we do in our recommendation, in the articles we recommend, to sort of try to not have those sort of contractual issues that would cause problems for staff and principals? And I don't.
So as a
I think
counterpoint,
it gets very convoluted.
as a counterpoint, as you start moving people to central office, you're going towards a one egg solution anyway. So the more people you draw out of sub-districts and have them work out of central office so that they can go across school districts, if that's the solution. You're just funneling part of your organization up through into the one egg solution. So you gotta watch out for that too.
But special ed joined the one egg before we were one egg. In almost every district in the state. Special ed was employed by Addison Northeast. It was not employed, every special educator in every school was not employed by Beeman or wherever. They were employed, not where they worked, but for the district.
By state law.
Same with food service and all that.
Which brings us back to why we're here.
Any further discussion? Does someone want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we move forward with the proper name for the single egg option as a model.
Unified Union School District.
As a model to work from in the next phases of our committee work.
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion by the committee? Okay, one of the things that we agreed to early on was before we took action on anything, we would also hear from anybody from the public who wants to speak. So
it looks like Sandra Lee would like to comment.
Okay, Sandy? Did you want to make a comment on this before we take action?
Hey there, guys. Can you see me all right?
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much. You know, governance in a unified district has been an ongoing subject for me as I joined the board of MAUSD, you know, just starting in March of this year, having come from a supervisory union type structure when I used to be on the board for the high school. And I don't disagree that there's definitely ease of administration having a unified structure, but one of the ongoing issues our unified district has is not so much about towns, but really about our local elementary schools and the communication that is limited by having one board over both the high school and all the 5 elementary schools in our district. And so at our meeting in October of this year, Steve Rooney, together with Nancy Cornell, was on the agenda and presented a structure for local advisory committees and district advisory committees, something that had been recommended, it sounds like a few years ago when MAUSD was formed, and yet 5 years have gone by and that hasn't happened for MAUSD. So what I would say is that in your thinking about going with the unified district model, really to keep in mind how from early on, if you vote that direction, to make sure that those other mechanisms are truly in place and don't get just put by the wayside, because it is very difficult for a group of 13 to deal with elementary issues and high school issues and supposed to be trying to do all of that business for even.
We lost you, Sandy.
So just to keep that in mind, what are the other mechanisms that you can include and make part of your agreement, if that's what you go forward with?
Thank you. Anyone else from the community?
No hands.
Okay, any other discussion among board members? All those in favor of the motion, and if we could maybe, I guess for, just because there's so many people who are attending by Zoom, committee members. So committee members, if you could, yeah, I don't think we can see everybody.
Well, yeah, but like the digital version.
So use the
Yeah.
thumbs up and
You already have a thumbs up, yeah.
You could use the thumbs up or the digital, and then Chilla can report out what those are. All those in favor of the motion, aye, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That is thumbs up. Keith is thumbs up.
Carol's
Carol,
thumbs up.
Brad,
thumbs up, yeah.
no response.
Yeah, she has.
And Brad.
I'm sorry. I was kicked off the meeting. Can someone tell me what the motion is?
Troy made a motion to do the modeling for the Unified Union School District. And Kevin seconded it.
Okay.
Okay, all those opposed?
No,
No.
Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Next agenda item is the communication key points.
Well, we got a presentation on enrollment decline and forecasting, I guess, for the next 5 years from Shannon and Gabe. And they also had made somewhat of a pros and cons list based off of I'm gonna miss something, enrollment, staffing, programming, and
impact on the menu of course offerings.
maybe it was courses. So I would throw that in with programming, but maybe it's student size, class size, maybe that was it.
Enrollment, class size, staffing, and programmatic.
Brilliant. And mostly, I guess I don't want to say whether it was positive or negative towards the merger, but I don't think it had more opportunity, I guess maybe is the word I would look at, or less destruction. I don't know.
Anyone else?
we had a transportation report that was somewhat concerning to me, and what I don't recall being included was how students would access the Hannaford Career Center. Whether that would be, well, I just don't know how they would do that without more ride on the bus. Of course, they ride on the bus now a little.
Was.
But that's not tonight.
Prior
Previous
meeting,
one.
the previous meeting, did we include it in
good
that
question.
meeting?
No,
As part of
but I can make a note of that and we can perhaps circle back to that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Will the slideshow that Dave and Shannon did be available?
We looked at feedback data from the community engagement sessions and tried to synthesize key points and main ideas, and we'll continue to work on that moving forward.
Anything else?
We need a resolution.
I think we discussed first.
Yeah, we had a lot
We had a lot of discussion.
I think we're having
Clarification.
More discussion and clarification
More-
of the two models under consideration.
Anything else? Anything? Great, you good, Jason?
I'm good.
We can put that together. All right. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Sarah, second. Yep. Kevin, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?